Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar State of Preschool 2025 Trends, Progress, and What's Next. I'm so glad you could join us today. My name is Winona Howe, and I am the Director of Early Learning at the National Association of State Boards of Education, or NASBE. And I am so honored to moderate today's webinar, co-hosted by NASBE and the National Institute for Early Education Research, NIEER, at Rutgers University. We're especially grateful to have a wonderful group of speakers with us today. From NIEER, we're joined by Dr. Steve Barnett and Dr. Allison Friedman-Krauss, who will help ground us in the latest findings from the State of Preschool Yearbook. We're also joined by state leaders from California, Maryland, and Mississippi. State Board of Education member Kim Pattillo Brownson from California, State Board member Greer from Maryland, and Dr. Jill Dent, Executive Director of the Office of Early Childhood from the Mississippi Department of Education. So each of them brings a valuable state perspective on what it takes to expand access, strengthen quality, support the early childhood workforce, and build stronger early learning systems. Before we begin, just a few quick logistics. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we will share the recording and follow-up materials afterwards. Please use the Q&A to submit questions for our speakers at any time. Do we have a Q&A here? Let me double check. Actually, since we're
the chat.
Yeah,
the chat box.
Just put in the chat because we really want to have an intimate conversation with you all. So this is set as a meeting format, so we get to see everybody's face. So anyway, so use the chat to put your question. We'll try our best to capture that. And let me see. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And we also love to have you introduce yourself in the chat. Please share your name, your organization, or your role that you play, and where you're joining us from. Today's conversation comes at a very important time. Every year, NIEER's State of Preschool Yearbook give us the very clear picture of where states are making progress on preschool access, funding, and quality, and where more work remains. But data is most powerful when it helps inform decisions. That is why we're so pleased to partner with NIEER for this conversation. Next slide, please. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time just to talk about NASBE's EC State Network. NASBE's network model has been very effective through many different programs and education topics. So in 2017, the EC network was revitalized and has now included 14 states and territories through 5 cohorts. The goal of the network is to support the B to third early childhood workforce through effective state policies. And our work has focused on early childhood educator competencies and licensure, preparation programs, career pathways, and professional development, and also educator compensation and well-being. Next slide. I know we're going to talk about NIEER. I just want to say over the past decade, NIEER's research, including the State of Preschool Yearbook, has been a very important resource for our network and our members. So with that, we want to continue today's conversation because we want to bring research and state leaders together to support stronger early learning systems. So with that, thank you for being here. Don't forget to put your question in the chat and keep introducing yourself. I'm delighted to turn this over to Dr. Allison Friedman-Krauss to begin sharing the key findings from the State of Preschool Yearbook 2025. Allison, take it away.
I think Steve's actually going to get us started.
Oh, Steve! Sorry, Steve, slide. Take it away. Sorry.
I'm going to get us started with a bit of context. Of course, beginning with the reason that we're all here and we care about this is because high quality preschool education can set the foundation for later success in school and life. I've spent my career as an economist studying this, beginning with the Perry Preschool study, and we've been tracking state policies because they're so important for the last 20, almost 25 years. And of course, all of you involved with state agencies and boards for education understand that our educational problems haven't got any easier over the last 25 years. We've made a lot of progress, but I think everybody knows that in recent years, our achievement trends have not been what we would like them to be. In 2024, 40% of our kids score below basic at fourth grade. That means their comprehension of any story, article, book they might read is quite poor. And that problem didn't start in third grade or fourth grade. Right? We can trace it all the way back to the years before they walked through kindergarten. So opportunities for this, the importance of this, they're great. I do want to acknowledge a lot of states face strong headwinds. You can see here in red the states that have structural budget deficits. There are a lot of states that don't. Those are the ones in green, but a lot of states that do. And that means priority setting is really important, and understanding why this is a priority, even if your state has tough budget decisions to be made. Next slide, Allison. The other thing to keep in mind in terms of opportunities is that K-12 enrollment has not only been declining, but it's projected to continue decreasing in most states. The states in dark red are the states that have the largest declines predicted through 2021. Any kind of red to pink is a decline. And even those light pink colors for states like Oklahoma, Texas, Minnesota, those are states where K-12 population is declining. And you can see there are very few places like Idaho with large increases in K-12 enrollment. Why do I point this out? Because it presents an opportunity to use resources that we've already dedicated to education for children below the kindergarten age, because we have fewer kids K-12 to serve. Allison?
Thanks, Steve. I am going to go through very quickly some of the key findings from our reports, so we allow plenty of time for all the other speakers we have here today. So as most of you know, the State of Preschool Yearbook is an annual survey that NIEER has been doing since 2002. This is our 23rd report. The report tracks annually investments and enrollment and quality standards for state-funded preschool programs, both nationally and in every state in the country. This work has been funded this year by the Heising-Simons Foundation and the Gates Foundation, and we thank them for their continued support of this work. It's really intended to be a tool for a variety of audiences, from researchers and practitioners and policymakers, advocates, reporters, to help move the needle on state-funded preschool to get more children access to the quality programs we know improve their short and long-term outcomes. Sorry, and if you haven't seen the report, there's a QR code where you can visit NIEER.org and access the report as well. In the 2024-2025 school year, which is the year that our most recent report focuses on, states enrolled nearly 1.8 million children in state-funded preschool programs. This includes 37% of 4-year-olds and 9% of 3-year-olds. Nationally, enrollment increased slightly by about 44,000 children, so we did see an increase. We saw record enrollment levels, but it was a much smaller increase than we saw the year before. Additionally, this increasing trend, we didn't see that in every state, and some states still have not increased enrollment in terms of number or percentage since before the pandemic. That is, they haven't recovered enrollment from their highs before the pandemic. And we know while there are fewer children in states because of population declines, this trend is not strictly driven by a fewer number of 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds in the state. And while preschool does remain primarily a program for 4-year-olds, as we can see, 37% of 4-year-olds versus 9% of 3-year-olds, we have seen that the pace of increase in 3-year-olds has accelerated over the past few years. So for the first over a decade of when NIEER's been tracking enrollment of 3-year-olds of preschool in general, we went from 3 to 4% over 12 years. The next 5 years, it increased by about 2 percentage points. Within the last 4 years, we've seen a 3.5 percentage point increase. So we see some signal that maybe states are starting to think more about 3-year-olds. There is the research that shows that 2 years of a quality program produces longer lasting impacts than only 1 year of a quality preschool program. But there is substantial variation across the states, and as states move ahead, these gaps are widening. In 2025, DC enrolled 94% of 4-year-olds, followed by Vermont at 76% of 4-year-olds, and Colorado also serves 70% of 4-year-olds. On the flip side, there are 5 states that don't fund a preschool program at all. I should say that 12 states total enrolled more than half of their states' 4-year-olds, and that there are some other states that are in striking distance. So California, Michigan, Alabama, all 3 of those states are working to increase enrollment in their programs. And so hopefully we'll see a new set of states surpassing that 50% mark. And just so it isn't clear, green on this map shows more enrollment, a higher percentage of children, with the darkest red showing no children enrolled. And now if we switch to the 3-year-old map, this uses the same color scheme as what I just showed. And what you can see, there's a lot more red. As I said before, most states don't prioritize 3-year-old enrollment. There are some notable exceptions. Again, DC enrolled 76% of 3-year-olds, Vermont 56%, and then New Jersey, Illinois, Kansas, and New Mexico, as well as Colorado, also enrolled more than 1/5 of 3-year-olds in their state-funded preschool programs. Now, if we look at spending trends across the last 20 or so years, this shows how investments in state preschool have increased, adjusted for inflation. In the 2025 year, states spent $14.4 billion on preschool. This increases to $17.7 billion when you include the federal and local sources that the states were able to also use to support preschool programs. Like enrollment, we did see a small increase in state spending on preschool this year, but it was much smaller than the $2 billion increase we saw last year. On the other hand, we saw a much larger increase in the amount of local and federal funding that states use. And some of this may just be an indicator that states are getting better at reporting that rather than they're actually using more money. It's a little bit hard to disentangle there. There's 3 states, California, New Jersey, and New York, that each spent more than $1 billion on preschool. California spent more than $4 billion on preschool, and Texas came close, spending almost $1 billion. When you put those 4 states' investments together, that's more than half of all preschool spending. We also looked at spending per child, which really hasn't moved all that much over the last 20 or so years, especially when you consider that more children in state-funded preschool programs are in full-day programs, which should cost more. So we were spending about $7,000 adjusted for inflation in 2002. This year, we're just above $8,000. And this level on average remains too low for states to really be able to fund a quality program meeting all of NIEER's benchmarks, providing parity for their teachers, and providing a full-day program. And spending per child also varies widely across the states by more than $20,000 between the highest state, which is DC, and some of the lowest states, which are spending less than $3,000 per child in state funds. In some of those states, it does increase when you include local and federal fundings, but there is still quite a wide discrepancy across states in how much they are investing in each child that they serve in their preschool programs. And I just want to turn quickly to NIEER's State of Preschool Quality Standard benchmarks. There's a set of 10 benchmarks that are what we consider the minimum that programs need to do in order to have a quality program. These are policies, they're not about actual implementation, and they are based on research. This lists each of the 10 benchmarks and shows you how many of the 63 programs met each benchmark last year. NIEER will be embarking on a process to revise these benchmarks over the course of the next year. We're happy to share more information as we do that. Currently, there are six states that meet all 10 of NIEER's quality standard benchmarks. Those are in the darkest green: Alabama, Georgia, Hawaii, Michigan, Mississippi, and Rhode Island. Georgia joined this list just this year as they improved policies related to class size and ratio in order to bring back class sizes down to where they used to be before the Great Recession. They also did this while improving teacher compensation. Georgia was the only state this year to improve policies related to quality in order to gain another benchmark. I'm definitely happy to talk more about the yearbook and answer questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Jill to talk about all the great things that Mississippi is doing.
Thank you, Allison. We have been, you can go to the next slide, so that we have been working on public funded pre-K since 2013. Our first cohort was in the 14-15 school year. And since then, we have met all of the 10 NIEER benchmarks for every year except for 1 year, when the benchmarks were changed. And so even though our numbers and the percentages don't look high for service, we have been really focused on our quality approach. We have a act with the Early Learning Collaborative Act that initiated this project, and those within that act, we all of the NIEER benchmarks were embedded in that. So the policy drove the high quality implementation, and we're really proud of being able to make sure that that happened. Okay, we can go to the next slide, which is about one of the things that we did early on in our office's work was to make sure that we had a free option for our teachers and assistant teachers to be able to have that early childhood specialized training. So we wanted to make sure that our teachers were focused on early childhood and had that background besides just a elementary license or a bachelor's degree in something else and being able to obtain a specialization in early childhood. So we went to the licensing commission and we were able to get that approved for an add-on endorsement for our teachers with a K license, which was really exciting. This project and process is free for all of our teachers and all of our assistant teachers that wish to go through the program. It does take 9 months. As you can see, it's a lot of hours. It's a lot of work, but when they come out of this program, they have the background and the knowledge to be able to deliver, excuse me, to deliver high quality interactions and teaching in their classroom. Since we have started this in, I believe, 2016, we've had 517 teachers and assistant teachers complete this. This year, wrapping up at the end of May, we have about 100 more to add to that number. We just don't have those final numbers yet, so I can't add that to that total yet. But we're really proud of this project. We have two coaches that are involved in making this happen and being able to be support services for our teachers and assistant teachers that get into the program and work through the process. So we're really proud of this. Okay. So the next thing, we have expanded our state-funded pre-K process and projects with our state-invested pre-K program. We've had our early learning collaboratives since 2013, as I mentioned before. This program was initiated in 2022. We have 33 of these programs. It's 135 classrooms, almost 2,000 children served, and there's a $13 million investment from our state legislature each year so far. And so comparative to our other program, which is our early learning collaboratives, that has 40 programs throughout the state. almost 7,000 children, 380 classrooms, and that investment is $29 million from our state legislature. So our state legislature has been amazing with supporting this project. We've had really good results with our state-funded pre-K programs, and we're really proud of the progress we made, even though we're small, which is okay. We're working to make it bigger. So even though we're small, we're proud of our projects, and our kids are ready for kindergarten when they come out of these programs. So, and I think that's all the slides I have. Kim, I think you're up.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Kim Pattillo Brownson. I'm with the California State Board of Ed. And I just want to actually start by thanking NASBE and NIEER for bringing us all together for this conversation. It's not every day that state boards of ed sort of focus very sort of unilaterally on early ed, and I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm definitely delighted also to share the story of California's investments and growth in this space. But I do think it makes sense to really start with our why. It is, I imagine, different in every state. And I think many of us share a concern and a desire for strong foundations, for school readiness, and a recognition that learning doesn't just start at 5, that it has origins and foundations that are not sort of born for the first time with 5-year-olds, but can be built, and that the school systems have an important role to play in building those. The data point that always really just gobsmacks me is there was a study out of Stanford a couple years back looking at California's annual yearly progress for its K-12 students. And our first year of standardized tests starts in 3rd grade. And the major finding was that on a year-to-year basis, California students do as well as, if not slightly better, than their peers around the nation in terms of annual progress starting in 3rd grade. The big differential that stuck out, however, was that in that moment of first testing in a standardized setting in 3rd grade, California students started behind the 8 ball, which is to say that our levels of proficiency at that first moment of assessment showed that there were gaps. And so early learning really is all the more important in a state like California, where if you don't want to actually be in the position of only addressing achievement gaps, but actually preventing those gaps from rearing their heads in the first place, early ed matters all the more. So with that, if we can go to the first slide, I'll start with a little bit of context. There's 2 primary programs in California. The California State Preschool Program, which is a long-standing program in California that grew out of working women during World War II and continued afterwards. This is a means-tested program focused on income eligibility. It serves 3s, 4s, and most recently has expanded temporarily, and we'll see if that continues into serving older 2-year-olds. On the next slide is transitional kindergarten, which is a newer program, but also one with some historical antecedents at this point that go back almost not quite 20 years, but about that. This is open to all 4-year-olds, regardless of any income verification. It's run through the public school systems and has had a lot of movement in the last couple of years. If we can go to the next slide. So transitional kindergarten, because it is a more unique California offering, is what I'm going to spend a little bit of time on here on the policy journey. It actually started, at least as a piece of state legislation, more than 15 years ago. So 2010 was the first year that it was actually permissively created to enable school districts to offer transitional kindergarten as the first year of a 2-year program. Then in 2020, California released and set a set of aspirations through its master plan for early learning and care. And universal preschool for 4-year-olds was named as one of the points of aspiration that we would move forward with. In 2021, the TK legislation was enacted, and it set out a 5-year phased implementation where about a quarter of all the birthdays would come online and be available to be served in local school districts, and also importantly, be funded through our K-12 school funding formula, which is protected by the Constitution and gives it a level of fiscal certainty, which I think is quite unique and important. On the next slide, these are our various programs that both serve 3s and 4s. This is a sort of a before and after snapshot right after the pandemic to the 23-24 school year. And what you see really is really tremendous growth. Transitional kindergarten obviously is the biggest line item in growth here. And what I also want to note is the 23-24 data that's here measures it at 151,000 in transitional kindergarten. Our most recent data is estimating for this past school year, 25-26, we're going to be at 215,000 4-year-olds being served across the state in transitional kindergarten. I think what's also important to note is that back in 2020, when we had created the master plan for early learning and care, we also set the aspiration to increase access to early learning opportunities, particularly for low-income 3-year-olds. And so there has been steady growth along that continuum, again, updating it to most recent numbers from 25-26 school year. There's been another 5,000 3-year-olds who have had in this last school year access to early learning opportunities through the state preschool program. There are definitely shifts happening, and these are real. And one of the things that we're paying attention to is how to make sure that we can both preserve and protect the community-based providers who have been providing preschool for many years, and we want to ensure that they are brought into the system and that we are partnering respectfully. I think part of the goal overall is to make sure, though, particularly for low-income students, that they have the benefit not just of 1 year of early learning and preparation, but in fact 2. I think many of us are familiar with the research around the degree to which the 30,000 word gap has been one of those predictive measures that tells you where children are likely to land. And when we can start earlier with our lower income students and children, we can actually make sure to erase those gaps. The next slide is a snapshot of 3-year-olds. This is a side-by-side of 3-year-olds of all incomes versus low income. This notably is inclusive of subsidized childcare, so that is not quite the same as just the state pre-K and the transitional kindergarten program. But what we are seeing is that more young children, and particularly more low-income young children in the 3 category, are now receiving services and now receiving education. And then the last slide, and I think I might be over, so I'll go quick. There has been massive growth. We're very excited about that. We are also excited about some of the quality improvement metrics that we will be hitting on NIEER's rating in the next go-round next year. We have moved from a student-to-teacher ratio of 12-to-1 to 10-to-1, and that actually just got implemented in this last budget year. We also have new training requirements for early educators in terms of both the teaching credential as well as either a CDA, a number of units in child development or past experience. The parallel front that is happening, not for existing teachers, but more for new teachers who are coming online as we have a retirement boom expected as boomers exit the workforce. The PK3 credential is one that really squarely looks at this early child development phase for 0 to 8. And the very exciting potential is this not just to be something that is a benefit for TK, but really the developmental approach is something that can pay dividends for children throughout their developmental trajectory. So it can be infused into kindergarten, first, second, third, and the proper preparation, I think, that the pre-K 3 credential is going to offer is a pathway there. The last thing I'll just note anecdotally is change happens differently and in each geography quite differently. But there is oftentimes, I think, a groundswell that begins in our localities and with our school district partners. I live in Los Angeles, and notably, there is no requirement currently for the assistant teachers in LAUSD to have, for example, an AA degree. But it is also the case that the last stat that I have seen is that 3/4 of them, in fact, have BAs. And so there are ways in which we are looking at carrots and sticks to incentivize quality and to bring folks along, and to also make sure that we are providing sufficient support to bring people along a quality continuum. So with that, I'll just say I'm excited for lots of progress and growth and investment that has continued even as the economy has had some bumps. And we're eager to continue this growth and partnerships with our CBO partners and quality improvement as the programs unfold. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. My name is Nick Greer. I'm with Maryland. Thanks, Kim, for that, and Jill also. As Kim said, we really appreciate NASBE for bringing this together and NIEER for continuously really beating this drum and putting out the yearbook so we can benchmark ourselves against others, even if that means that in Maryland we yet again have to see Mississippi excelling. And it's something that we hear a lot about with Mississippi's former superintendent sitting in Maryland now. So thanks, Jill, for sharing that success with us today. But honestly, the Maryland momentum is building some steam. So let's talk a little bit about that. So next slide. So pillar one of our blueprint, just to give a little bit of background here, is this is what's known as the blueprint for Maryland's future, but pillar one really emphasizes high quality early childhood opportunities. The blueprint is really our legislative mechanism for ensuring that school funding is protected despite some of the fiscally challenging environments that Steve was mentioning earlier. And we're doing our best to keep it in place, and we really believe that it is the way for us to protect that funding. In pre-K specifically, that means reaching more 3- and 4-year-olds through our mixed delivery system, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the panel. We monitor quality by requiring all publicly funded providers to participate in our state's quality rating system, and we'll take a look at that as well. Let's move on to the next slide. Our state strategic plan, I'm just going to really quickly note this. We are beginning to note everywhere where our strategic plan aligns to the blueprint. And so undergirding that is this strategic plan. I won't go too deep on this, but you can see that our plan is organized around the blueprint's 5 pillars. Let's go to the next slide and zoom in on pillar one. So the strategic plan lays out for us that we have, these outcomes to monitor, and we're paying attention to that as a board, and we're tracking it at every one of our meetings, both publicly and in executive sessions. For pillar one, those include increasing kindergarten readiness for all student groups and decreasing gaps across groups, as well as increasing the number of 3- and 4-year-olds in high quality pre-K, as you can see here. So we just kind of have an eye on the outcomes. And by doing that, we keep coming back to it and talking about which strategies are best in order to accomplish that. Let's move to the next slide. This is where we'll dig into the pre-K program specifically and just look at some of the numbers. So for pre-K, Maryland has both formula funding and a competitive grant program that offers providers the opportunity to apply to ultimately roll into formula funding. This slide actually focuses on our pre-K expansion competitive grant program, which you can see here. Over half of our expansion grant sites meet our state's highest quality rating. And a subset of our teachers are taking advantage of multiple pathways to become a lead teacher, which we are really proud of. And we know that by kind of pushing on that, it's creating a system of continuous improvement. Not included on this slide, but I think it's really important that everybody hears. In 23-24, we have seen nearly a 75% increase in the enrollment of students in participating private providers, which is super important to our mixed delivery health. And so that enrollment is actually split about 80-20 across centers and family childcare homes. So it's sort of like the big centers and the smaller family childcare system. While we're really eager to increase our reach, we're really cognizant of the fact that ensuring our programs we have to ensure that our programs remain really high quality, and we see that in the benchmarks in the yearbook. For example, we're expanding the use of what's known as CLASS. That's the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, for those of you who are following along. Across all program types to ensure that data on classroom quality is systematically collected. And we use that data at the state and program level to help improve policy and practice. We really see that as being that continuous quality improvement piece that we know we're not quite making the mark on here with the benchmarks in the yearbook. Let's take a look at slide 6, or our 6th slide, I should say. This actually is emphasizing, we had an opportunity this year to step back and think a little bit more creatively about how we approach the work. And so we've been talking to stakeholders and advocates across the state and even providers and getting really close to the work. And that has brought in the use of human-centered design. And so with a little bit of funding from NASBE, thank you, we were able to match some of that funding at the state level, and we built a human-centered design review or expert review into our state's pre-K application for providers, which has actually lowered the barrier for many of our providers to access some of our services. We conducted focus groups and we iterated based on their feedback for many months, and we streamlined and made the application much more user-friendly. So for example, one of the things that we changed, which feels like low-hanging fruit, but came out of this process, was we opened the pre-K application window 2 months earlier to support planning and enrollment. And then we simplified the application process and the application system for easier navigation and completion. And then we increased the technical assistance and office hours that were offered in Spanish translated services in order to ensure that all and many different types of our mixed delivery offers were served. Beyond that, we meet quarterly with providers and our advocacy community and a board committee that's focused on early childhood. And we hear a lot about, this is the place where we hear the challenges and the barriers to a thriving mixed delivery system. And it gives us an opportunity to champion some of the wins and just be able to be accountable to some of the challenges. For instance, this is the place where we hear about the importance of doing our best to prioritize 3-year-olds whenever we can, and unpack the challenges that it takes to really make that work, as Allison was mentioning a little bit earlier. We also unpack the challenges and barriers to a healthy mixed delivery system, as I mentioned. And that's all I got for today. Why don't we turn it over, I think, to Winona?
Yeah, well, thank you, Nick. Yeah. So maybe, Allison, we can bring everybody back. You can stop sharing. Well, I would love to encourage everybody to put your question in the chat. This is a perfect timing to do that when Allison to spotlight everybody. She is so good at technology. She's a great researcher and a great tech guru. All right. So this is great presentations from states, from researchers. I learned so much from you all. So again, thank you so much. So I do have some questions for you guys. So let's give some time. All right, wonderful. Now we have everybody. So my first questions really for NIEER, for Steve and also Allison. So your data kind of show different paths to approach state-funded pre-K. You have state prioritizing quality. Some states are prioritizing scale. So tell us a little bit about this pattern and what are the conditions for success, and what are the recommendations that you have for states? Who want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take a shot and we'll see what Allison might want to add. So the first step is really what we'd call enabling conditions. You have to have champions. You have to have state capacity. The foundation for creating a good program is built on public and political will. And state boards can help set that, both by providing leadership and educating other leaders. So I think there are important roles there and educating the public. I think there are important roles in building those enabling conditions for quality. And then there's developing a strategy for achieving that with what I would say is one of the most important criteria, and that's a date certain. Right. And so you see this with California. By this date, we will meet this goal. It's not someday, sometime, we will meet this goal. And we recognize, things happen. You hit a recession, there's an emergency, right? Dates can get postponed, but they don't seem to ever happen if they're not set. So setting it, really having a timeline. Marilyn talked about a blueprint, right, that Nick set out for us. A blueprint is not just a description of the framework. It's also got timelines in it for when you want to achieve what. And so those are important. And then all of that is what enables people to come up with the questions we get all the time from legislative bodies. So what is this going to cost? Well, if you've mapped it out and you have a timeline, you have basic quality parameters and enrollment, that's mostly going to drive costs and provide a basis for figuring out what is it that we need to have the political will to raise in terms of funding for programs. So, and states do take different strategies. Some states take the strategy of let's go as fast as we can and get all the kids, and then we'll fix quality later. I think that's very risky and often doesn't work because you get to scale, and now the cost of raising quality for all the kids is politically untenable. We might have taken that in smaller bites, but how do you give a fully qualified teacher with K-12 parity to every child if you're not anywhere near that? And you can't say, well, we'll do 10% this year. It's that doesn't work. But if you set the quality, Mississippi's an example. You set the standards in place and you grow it. Now, depending on your politics, you have to balance that out. All right. So I think there are states where you have to grow pretty fast to build the political will and support and sustain it. But if you have at least a plan in place for how and when we're going to get quality, it's not someday we might do something. I think you're in much better shape. Right? And I think you saw 3 good examples here.
Allison, anything to add?
I think Steve really covered everything I would have said. So if you want to move on,
Great.
that's fine.
Great. Thank you. So, Mississippi, yeah. You guys, you've been meeting the 10 benchmark for many years. That's wonderful. Kudos to Mississippi folks. Question about access. So you've been building this strong foundation for many years. So how do you make the case for expanding access for young children? Tell us a little bit of your strategy making the case about investment.
So one of the things we really do is we try to each legislative session really connect with our legislators and make sure that they know what we're doing. We try to make sure that our news, such as meeting the NIEER benchmarks, is getting to them and they really enjoy hearing those types of achievements, just because with them funding us, they want to be able to see progress and they want to see results. And so that shows them that we're in the trenches and we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And there's other things that we want to make sure that they're happy with our work. So we talk with them um, about their investments and how that looks and what that means for our fours. They can see from school districts and they hear from their superintendents in their communities about how these kids are prepared and ready for kindergarten when they come in, because they can tell a difference between the ones that attend our state-funded pre-K and the ones that may not or may come from home. And so it's a very wide range of growth for many of our kids and from different backgrounds.
Great, thank you. I think this webinar, like you can definitely send this recording to the
Yeah,
legislators afterwards, right? We're
right.
celebrating your success. Wonderful. So to Kim, California, you guys apparently expanding the access for so many young children. This is great news. And we're talking about quality. And I know, Kim, you talked about it in your presentation already. I want to touch on another thing here. So you mentioned like bringing providers along the journey to bring them into your system, especially the TK system. So say a little bit more about that. And also I want to ask you, how do you bring policymaker along the journey as well? Apparently you're a policymaker. What about the other? You're like, how do you find allies in this journey? So talk about policymaker and providers. How do you bring them together?
So I'll take the second one first. We have been incredibly fortunate in that our governor has actually been out in front, leading on a lot of these investments in a really, I think, profound way, partially born of actually having young children and also being quite immersed, I think, in a lot of the literature around why early learning investments pay off and are critical. One of the things that I think is incredibly important oftentimes to share both with policymakers as well as sort of the full coterie of elected officials is that this is something that parents and voters really do actually care about. There is sometimes, I think, a sense, and it is a waning sense, but I'll say in past years, there's been a sense that early education is sort of a nice to have when you are flush with lots of funding, as opposed to something that you need to have because all children need strong foundations. The PPIC just came out with, the Public Policy Institute of California just came out with its annual survey data, and it's nearly 70% of Californians who are saying that they believe that TK is a wise investment and that they see the connections between early learning and success in the K-12 system. And that tends to be incredibly powerful, I think, as both a data point, but also as our elected officials sort of are taking stock of what Californians believe is necessary for the success of the next generation. I think the partnerships with community-based organizations are incredibly important. TK is a program, transitional kindergarten is a program that's squarely within the school system and run by school districts. There's been a lot of flow of talent from community-based programs into transitional kindergarten programs. And part of, I think, what we are trying to sort of walk a line on is when educators make the decision to join school districts, that is a decision that oftentimes is quite helpful for them financially. It goes from potentially being a solo operator to quite a significant bump up in income to having retirement and a whole different sort of set of supports that are enabled by employment with the school district. That said, the California State Preschool Program is a mixed delivery program, meaning I think it's about a little less than 2/3 now of the state preschool programs are actually run by school districts, and about a third are community-based providers who play a vital role in actually providing those programs, especially as California, I think, is starting to move, it has more children moving to TK for 4-year-olds. The state preschool programs are increasingly shifting to serve more 3s. And I think part of our thinking is how do we support that transition so that community-based providers are in a position to be successful in serving a slightly different demographic, but one that actually requires some shifts. And honestly, to think about how to honor work that has shown to be incredibly valuable. We know of some research that will be forthcoming around the sort of multiplier effect of having both the benefit of state preschool plus transitional kindergarten. And it is something I will say as a parent that I think just makes so much sense. Middle-class parents don't ask their families to choose to either have second or third grade. You expect that your child will have both. And I think when we think about early learning, having a program for a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old is something that parents benefit from and that we want them to have.
Well, thank you, Kim. There are a lot of system, a lot of program need to be kind of build them together at the same time. So that's definitely hard work. So thank you. So to Nick, Maryland. Maryland's like a star student in our network for sure, because we're always feel so amazed that you guys are so thoughtful about this mixed delivery system. You actually mean it. Like you're intentionally built this provider network, their council, right? You bring them together quarterly. You meet with them. So this is awesome because you really want to hear like hear about their needs, and then make policy to accommodate that. So Maryland actually has very strong per child investment, but you're still building out a system, working through some challenges around workforce and providers. So how do you make sure the program quality keeps pace so that legislators and funders stay committed? That's my first question. And then what's your top priority? Because I feel like just like every state, you're dealing with a lot. So number one is how do you keep legislators and funders stay committed? And the second one is your top priority. Sorry, 2 questions. Go ahead.
That's okay, Winona. It's fine. You could call us an A+ student, and then I'll just, maybe not be an A+ response. It's going to be good. So I honestly, it's all a balancing act. And I think that there's a lot to making this work. And we heard Jill and we heard Kim kind of talk about some of the challenges that are the same in Maryland, even though in different contexts, right? And so what we really do, and I'll answer your second question first, like our top priority is to continue to improve quality pre-K. And because we really believe that if we can focus on that, if we can keep getting into classrooms and seeing what's happening, then we can continue to ensure that that quality continues to ratchet up. And then that provides real true options for parents that are incredibly important. And I'll talk about that in the second part of my response. But, as far as updating our quality rating improvement system, we really want it to better reflect teacher and child interactions. So we're in there trying to see what's happening between teacher and child, instead of just sort of checking the box on the regulatory type things that need to be accomplished. That's there too, but so we just believe that knowing the relationship between the young person and the teacher is really critical to improving outcomes for kids. So we're also in the midst of creating a list of approved high quality instructional materials that we're beginning to push into classrooms and do training around, and the curriculum obviously that comes along with that. We have had the opportunity to do that through a generous grant from a federal source, the Preschool Development Grant Program. And so that's a really great opportunity for us to kind of increase quality and show that we're continuing to focus on it. So then back to what I was saying earlier about families. So the next way that we help legislators really pay attention to this is to remember that families, especially mothers who don't have access to high quality pre-K, don't work often or have barriers and challenges to making it to work or barriers to employment. And so that hurts the state economically in many different ways. And so we also are prioritizing and focusing on access. So while quality remains really critical in our eyes, we're also trying to increase access to high quality pre-K. So also through the PDG, the Preschool Development Grant, we are developing a centralized pre-K enrollment system for private providers. That's actually going to level the playing field a little bit between private providers and LEAs that are providing access. And it makes it a little bit easier from the family standpoint. And then again, through that human-centered design, we're watching it through the family lens on how they are applying and how they're experiencing the application process. So it's a little bit easier. So then the first part of your question, the priorities align with our legislators' priorities. We keep talking to them in the same way that Jill was saying, like we keep having conversations about it. And there is deep priority around early childhood in the state. And so they really want us to be able to provide families with that real-time enrollment data on pre-K and childcare. And so we're helping to provide them with that data as best we can. And we believe that that's our big first step to getting there.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Nick. Since you're talking about curriculum, I'm wondering if Steve and Allison, you want to talk about some revision for your State of Preschool yearbook next year?
Sure, we can spend a few minutes on that. So it's been about 10 years since we last revised our State of Preschool benchmarks. So we are beginning a process to sort of take inventory of what we're looking at. We're having conversations with the states about what they think should be our new benchmarks and why, and how to ask questions to really get at those policies as well. The benchmarks will continue to be research-based, so we will be taking into consideration conversations with national experts, conversations with the states, what the research has shown in order to develop some new benchmarks. We'll have a focus on what policies around curriculum use and implementation, preschool child assessments, continuous quality improvement systems, early learning development standards, as well as professional development and coaching models across some of these other areas. And one of the tricky parts is thinking about, like, when you're thinking about a quality early childhood system, these things are all really, really linked. So how to then tear them apart into individual benchmarks is a little bit of a challenge, but we really want to make sure we touch upon all these elements, as well as thinking about how these policies include or support children with special needs, children who are dual language learners, children with challenging behavior problems. Some of this does stem from the recent National Academy's report on preschool curriculum. So some of that will factor in. It's not the only source we're looking at. But I think we'll also, we're going to look into some of the issues around staffing, whether or not parity is going to factor into the benchmarks or be some sort of other indicator that we look at separately. So we will hopefully be starting some conversations with our states next week or the week after. And then we'll have, over the course of the next year, figure it out, hopefully.
That's great. Yeah, I'm looking at the time and also I'm monitoring the chat. Everybody seems very quiet. I think people just enjoy you guys talking here, So we have 1 minute left. I'm wondering if any of you want to share some last words of wisdom with the state folks here on the call. Anyone want to start? Actionable steps or something.
I'll just go ahead and say that I'm very pleased to be on this call today, and I appreciate all of y'all's knowledge and wisdom. And thank y'all all so much for serving our children and families in education and our teachers. So thank y'all.
Great, thank you. What about from our speakers? Anyone want to share last words for our audience? Nick?
I gotcha. The A+ student can't not speak.
Yes.
the thing I'd like to just say is we've hit it a few times here, and I know it's incredibly important, but it feels easy to do, but it's super hard. Conversations with providers, I think, and I know I'm paused, but I think you can hear me. But conversations with providers, I think, is very, very, very important. And I will tell you that it's some of the hardest conversations that I sit in and have as a board member, because we can't do everything, but it makes the biggest difference in especially a mixed provider system, because we know it's a challenging system and we all come around with a common goal, and we have the ability to be able to sit with that common goal and then say, what can we realistically do? And hear one another. And sometimes that's the most important part, is to just be able to hear the challenges and then do what we can, but also recognize what we can't, and hope for the best as we move forward. And what ends up happening sometimes is 2 + 2 = 5. Because advocates and others hear it and pick up, and then we start to see additional things start to float, because the barriers that we thought existed actually don't. So I think it's really important to have those conversations, even though they seem very, very hard to do.
Yeah, super. And I'll just add to that and listen to have those conversations with parents.
+1.
Great.
Winona, can I add a little twist to that?
Yes, go ahead.
So in your world, you support the boards. And so with Mississippi, we have a very invested board, and our board was sure to make sure that pre-K was involved in that. So we have a subcommittee that is focused on pre-K. And that's meaningful because our state board determines our policies. They approve our policies we put up for them. And so we want to make sure that we are putting policies in place that are for the best of children, and they are always champions in our corner to be able to help us help us do that.
Great. Thank you. All right. So, well, with that, thank you everybody so much for joining us today. And thank you, speakers. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. We'll follow up with all the materials that you need. All right. Have a good one. Thank you. Bye-bye.